She's in violation. Cynthia Bellamy, president of our HOA board, spat the words as two uniformed officers shoved my niece against a patrol car. The metal rang when Ava's shoulder hit. Her scream split the cul-de-sac. Cynthia's smirk didn't shift. Her sunglasses reflected the whole neighborhood like she owned it. Public indecency, she added, pointing at Ava's shorts as though they were a felony. What she didn't know was that the very cameras backing her up were also betraying her. Those officers' body cams, I said evenly, locking eyes with her. They are streaming to the county oversight server. Live. The faint flicker on her face told me the words had landed, even as her mask of control snapped back into place. And that's where things turn. Tyrants always stumble when evidence refuses to be silenced. My name is Daniel Mercer. I design surveillance networks, spent years writing the firmware that powers those same cams. Cynthia assumed I was just a quiet uncle raising my sister's kid in the suburbs. She couldn't have been more wrong. Rachel, my sister, carved her initials into the oak in our front yard before cancer took her. She made me promise to keep Ava safe and the house standing. That oak is my anchor when the notices stack up. Watching Ava cuffed for a pair of shorts turned that promise into fire. Neighbors froze in place, trapped between outrage and fear. Phones trembled in hands. Some people filmed, others looked away. I heard the scrape of metal against Ava's skin, the hiss of the engine, the hollow echo of humiliation Cynthia staged to remind everyone who held power. But the system she leaned on was designed by me, and it was rigged to betray her the moment she overstepped. When the patrol car rolled away, Cynthia delivered her line, "Maybe you'll think twice before ignoring board directives," and strutted back to her fortress of an office. The blinds there never open. Outside, homeowners clutched violation slips like summonses, waiting their turn to be humbled. Among them stood Tel Gaines, the HOA's maintenance supervisor. Clipboard in hand, jaw working, eyes flicking toward me. Not comfortable. Not loyal either. I filed his conflict away. Back home, under Rachel's oak, I logged into the oversight portal with old contractor credentials. Ava's arrest streamed there in raw form. I downloaded it to a secure drive. Cynthia's empire thrived on curated narratives, letters, staged photos, threats dressed as policy. But raw footage, uncut and time-stamped, is unspinnable. What she orchestrated wasn't governance. It was cruelty. That file was more than evidence. It was a crack in her armor. By evening a violation notice flapped on my door, claiming Rachel's oak threatened sidewalks. She'd reduced my sister's memorial to a line item in her war. I tore it down and walked straight to the clubhouse. Inside, the room reeked of stale coffee. Cynthia sat at the head of a long table, red blazer sharp, sunglasses worn indoors like armor. She pushed liens across the table to trembling families. Every motion was theater meant to reinforce fear. I stood at the doorway, quiet. My silence was a blade sharper than words. "You may leave, Mr. Mercer," she snapped, "unless you'd like trespassing added to your record." I met her stare. "I don't trespass. I build. And the systems you depend on answer higher than you." The smallest crack crossed her face. She dismissed the session in haste. Outside, Tell stood again, knuckles white on his clipboard. He didn't speak, but his silence was screaming. Back home, I combed through the oversight logs. That's when it surfaced, an unauthorized command override. Not county dispatch. The HOA's own network. Cynthia, or someone under her, had hijacked enforcement. Not just intimidation. Abuse of authority. A smoking gun hidden in code. I saved the chain, encrypted it, copied redundancies. I needed more than logs. I needed a conscience from inside her machinery. Tell's strained body language told me he was already cracking. The next morning, I found him behind the tennis courts, hunched over a clipboard, sanctuary of tools and stale coffee around him. I held up a flash drive. "This isn't rumor. It's data." Cynthia issued an override from here. Recognition flickered across his face before he dropped his clipboard, papers scattering. He dragged his hands down his face, shoulders sagging like a man cornered by his own silence. His breathing went heavy, uneven, like every inhale was a chain. You already knew, I said quietly. He didn't deny it. His lips parted, then sealed again, guilt written in every tremor. Finally, he whispered, I was told it was protocol. But I've worked systems long enough to know protocol doesn't look like that. His confession barely above breath, but enough. He didn't pocket the flash drive. He didn't push it away either. That was all I needed. The crack was widening. That night, Rachel's oak swayed in the wind while I traced override strings line by line. And then, at my door, Tell appeared, collar damp with sweat, clipboard clutched like a shield. His voice low and taut, I saw the override. I didn't issue it, but I was in the room when she did. He handed me a worn notepad. Timestamps scribbled down. Each one matched the metadata. He'd risked everything to place the key in my hand. It wasn't rumor anymore. It was corroboration. The county library became my war room. Among dust and humming old terminals, I built the chain, logs, footage, Tell's notes, mapped into an architecture of abuse. Each override connected to a neighbor fined, threatened, or humiliated. Ava's arrest stood at the center. I copied the evidence into multiple drives, one mailed directly to the inspector's office. Cynthia's game depended on silence. I would drag it into light. But evidence hidden in files doesn't topple tyrants. People do. So I went to the park. Neutral ground. Under the picnic shelter, I projected the footage. Neighbors drifted closer, one by one. They saw Ava slammed against metal, Cynthia pointing, officers obeying. And then they saw the metadata proving it came from her network. Murmurs swelled into outrage. Stories spilled, sons ticketed, families threatened over toys, fines for flags. Tell stepped forward, hands trembling but voice steady. She told me it was protocol. It wasn't. That was the spark. Fear cracked into fury. The silent Cynthia had built her empire on finally split open. When the board meeting came, the clubhouse overflowed. Cynthia sat at the head of the table, red blazer crisp, lips tight. She opened with her usual script, violations, fines, standards, but the crowd wasn't docile. Questions cut through her cadence. Anger rippled. I stood, laptop bag heavy at my side, and said, I have evidence of unauthorized command overrides, including the unlawful arrest of my niece, Ava. Gasps tore through the room. Cynthia's hand froze on her folder. I connected the laptop to the projector. The footage lit up the wall. Metadata scrolled beside Ava's arrest. Then Tell rose, voice shaking but unflinching, it's not out of context. I was there. She's been using law enforcement as her hammer. The room erupted. Residents shouted, waved fines, demanded answers. Cynthia slammed her hand on the table, voice shrill. But her allies dropped their eyes. One board member finally stood, effective immediately. I motioned to suspend Cynthia Bellamy from her duties. The cheer that followed shook the walls. Neighbors spilled into the night like power lines after a storm, buzzing with release. Ava ran to me, finally freed after oversight officers intervened with the packet I'd mailed. Her arms locked around me, whispering, I thought you couldn't stop her. I told her what Rachel made me promise. I wouldn't let them break her spirit. Under the oak tree, neighbors gathered, tracing initials carved in bark. It had been the symbol Cynthia tried hardest to erase. Tonight it became the rallying point. I projected the footage once more against my house, not to gloat but to remind everyone of their strength. Plans formed in whispers, committees, elections, audits. Rachel's oak stood tall, roots unshaken. Cynthia's reign was over. And it wasn't my evidence alone that broke her. It was the community, rising together, finally loud enough to drown her out. The shed smelled faintly of mulch and gasoline, a cramped sanctuary cluttered with tools, old parts, and a coffee pot that looked like it had survived decades of service. Tell Gaines was there, shoulders tight, foot tapping against the concrete floor in restless rhythm. When I stepped inside, he stiffened, pen frozen mid-word on the clipboard. I didn't waste time. I held up a flash drive, 2 fingers steady. This isn't gossip. It's data. Your board president issued an unauthorized command override. It came from the HOA's own network. His reaction betrayed him. His eyes flicked away, landing on the mower, the bench, the coffee pot, anywhere but me. His jaw clenched as the clipboard trembled in his grip until he dropped it too quickly, papers scattering across the floor. Silence thickened until his breathing grew uneven, a man torn between fear and conscience. You already knew, I said quietly. You saw it happen. Finally, he whispered, she told me it was protocol. His voice cracked with disgust. But I've worked systems long enough to know protocol doesn't look like that. I placed the flash drive on the bench between us. This isn't just a violation, Tell. It's abuse of authority. If you keep covering for her, you're complicit. But if you step forward, you help stop it. His hand hovered above the drive, fingers trembling, before pulling back. You don't get it. I've got kids here, a mortgage. She can ruin me. She already is, I pressed. Today it's Ava. Tomorrow it could be your family. He shut his eyes, exhaling hard. Fear nailed him in place, but guilt pried him loose. He didn't pocket the drive, but he didn't push it away either. That was enough for now. I left the shed in silence, knowing I'd struck something he couldn't bury forever. Back at my house, Rachel's oak tree swayed in the dusk. Its roots stood deeper than any regulations Cynthia Bellamy could write. I powered up my workstation, the glow of monitors filling the empty living room. Ava's chair sat vacant beside me, textbooks abandoned, her absence a wound that refused to close. I pulled up the oversight logs again, line after line of metadata scrolling like arteries across the screen. And there it was, not just the footage of Ava's arrest, but a second anomaly, a command override injected straight from the HOA's private network. Cynthia had hijacked enforcement. That wasn't mismanagement. That was criminal. The discovery hit like a hammer. My profession had taught me to see patterns in data, but this wasn't a pattern, it was a smoking gun. She hadn't just staged humiliation. She had bent law enforcement into her own weapon. I copied the strings into an encrypted drive, labeling the file command chain. My fingers struck the keys with precision drilled from years of debugging networks. Every click rang like steel, every keystroke another nail in her coffin. But timing was everything. If I moved too soon, she'd spin it. If I waited too long, Ava would suffer. I thought of Tell again, the guilt behind his silence, the way his hands shook when the truth brushed too close. He was a man straddling the line between loyalty and conscience. And now I had the leverage to push him across. The oak's shadow stretched long across the lawn as night settled. Cynthia had marked that tree as a violation, but what she feared wasn't roots. It was what they stood for: promises, memory, defiance. I whispered Rachel's name into the dark, a vow tightening in my chest. Tomorrow, I'd press Tell harder. Tomorrow, I'd test if his conscience outweighed his fear. For now, though, I secured duplicates of the override strings to offsite servers. Redundancy was survival. No single failure would erase the evidence. With that done, I stared through the window at Rachel's oak. She had carved her initials there once, believing some things outlasted tyranny. She was right. Sleep never came. I replayed the override code in my head until dawn. By the time the sun rose, my course was set. The weekend brought the board meeting, and with it, the stage Cynthia Bellamy had built for herself. But this time, she wasn't the only one writing the script. The clubhouse parking lot overflowed, neighbors spilling into the walkways in murmuring clusters. Inside, the air reeked of coffee and cologne, folding chairs creaking as every corner filled. Cynthia sat at the head of the table, red blazer sharp as a blade, papers stacked like props in her theater of control. "Mr. Mercer," she said when I entered, her smile thin, her voice amplified by the hush. "Here to observe, I hope, not disrupt." I took my seat. "I'm here to listen." She ran through her routine. Fines, violations, threats polished into bureaucratic poetry. But tonight, the crowd wasn't silent. Murmurs grew into interruptions, complaints about midnight visits, about liens issued after single missed payments, about children scolded for toys left in the yard. Her polished dismissals only fanned the flame. When she reached new business, I rose. The scrape of my chair cut sharper than any gavel. "I have evidence," I said, my voice steady though my pulse thundered. "Evidence of an authorized command overrides issued from this very office. Overrides that led directly to false enforcement actions. Most recently, the unlawful arrest of my niece, Ava Mercer." Gasps rippled through the room. Cynthia's face froze, but her knuckles whitened against the folder edge. "This is highly irregular," she snapped. "You have no standing here." I connected my laptop to the projector. The screen lit with Ava's arrest, her body slammed against the patrol car. Metadata scrolled beside the footage, each timestamp an indictment. Then Tell rose from the back row. His clipboard was gone. His hands shook, but his voice carried. "It's not out of context. I was there. She issued the commands. Told me it was protocol. I knew it wasn't. She's been using law enforcement as her personal hammer." The room erupted. Neighbors shouted, holding up fines like shackles. A man barked about midnight tickets. A woman cried about toys in the yard. Their stories poured out, years of silence shattering at once. Cynthia slammed her fist on the table, but her demand for order drowned beneath their storm. I advanced the footage again, showing Cynthia's finger stabbing the air as officers obeyed. The proof was undeniable. The mask she wore cracked for all to see. "You think an oversight log means anything?" she screamed. "None of you understand the law." I cut her off. "It's not your meeting anymore. It's theirs." The chant started in the back. "Vote her out." It spread like fire, fists pounding, voices thundering. Even children peeked wide-eyed as the community that had been cowed for years rose against its own captor. One board member finally stood, his voice trembling but resolute. Effective immediately, I motioned to suspend Cynthia Bellamy from her duties, pending review. Cheers drowned the room. Cynthia's pen slipped from her hand, clattering on the table like a broken gavel. Her reign collapsed where it had thrived, in public spectacle. Outside, the night air buzzed with conversation. Neighbors clutched violation slips not as chains but as trophies. For the first time since Ava's arrest, hope shone in their faces. Tell found me by the lot, eyes clearer than ever. "She can't scare me anymore," he admitted. "Not after tonight." Then Ava ran to me, released after county oversight reviewed the evidence I'd mailed. She buried her face in my chest, whispering, "I thought you couldn't stop her." I held her shoulders, meeting her eyes. "Rachel made me promise to keep you safe. I wasn't about to break that." When we returned home, the oak tree swayed in the moonlight, neighbors gathering around it like a monument. Some traced Rachel's initials in the bark, the symbol Cynthia had tried to erase. But tonight, it became the rallying point of a community reborn. I cast the footage one last time against my house, not as shame for Cynthia, she was finished, but as proof of our own strength. Silence fell, not heavy now, but steady, like roots digging deeper. One by one, neighbors pledged to audit every past decision, to hold elections instead of decrees. The machine Cynthia built had crumbled, and under Rachel's oak tree, something stronger was growing. For the first time in too long, the air tasted clean. My skills had exposed her, but it wasn't me who toppled her. It was all of us, united by stories, scars, and the refusal to stay silent. And that was the real victory.